Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest SAAL structured conversation, exploring new frontiers together, taking equity work to the next level in student affairs and beyond. I am super excited to have Dr. Divya Bheda here to present to you all, and I'm so excited. Without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to her and let her guide us through this process. So take it away, Divya.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for making the time to be here. It's always nice, even though things are recorded, it's just nice to have a live audience because then you actually have some interaction. And so that's going to be good. So we'll start off the day with, we'll start off the session with a quick interactive poll. I put the link, it's www, and you can see it on top of your screen as well, pollev.com/Divya Bheda 133. You can use a web browser, you can use your phone, whatever feels comfortable, and then you can drop what you're feeling right now as you attend this session. I know I'm nervous, so I will start there. This is an idea that I've literally or I wouldn't say it's an idea, it's just like things that have been sitting with me in my head for a while now with all the consulting work that I've been doing, and I've verbalized it to very few people in the way that I'm sharing it with you. So I feel like you are who I'm workshopping it with, and I hope it lands the way I want it to land, and I hope it's helping you think about things differently. And I would love for personal feedback. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can reach out to me via email, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are as you hear the case that I'm making for us to change the way we do business is what it is. So to all those who are mostly in the green, yay! And to all those who are in the yellows, I'm with you. And in the orange, I just want to give a virtual hug and say thank you for being here. And I hope, whatever it is that's making you feel not so great, I hope you're able to tackle it and, move forward. So thank you again, everyone. Again, this is pollev.com, Divya Bheda 133. I have about 5 more questions through this session that I will be asking you. So if you can open up a web browser and, type in the information, that would be wonderful. Okay, without further ado, all of you know this session is being recorded. So if you feel comfortable, sharing in the chat, please, engage with me in the chat if you want to say hello. I know Joe is keeping tabs on the chat as well. But Paul Levy is there, and you can always say hello in the chat as well. Okay, so a little bit about me, for those of you who don't know me. I'm Divya Bheda. I have my PhD in critical and social cultural studies in education. I am an immigrant. I'm originally from India. I came here to do my second master's and my PhD, and my roots are actually in student affairs. So when I first came to the US as an international student, I was a public relations, mass communication, event manager kind of person in India. That was my professional role in my master's. And so when I came here, I immediately, the kind of work that I did was all around student affairs stuff. I led summer bridge programs. I did, supported international students coming to learn English ELL programs. I worked in the Office of Institutional Equity and Diversity and did a lot of programming, managed the Dr. Martin Luther King Awards. So a lot of the work, so my whole 5 years of my PhD was all in student affairs or in DEI. And part of that was also my lived experience, where a lot of the experience that I was having was around, as an international student, I would often get the message go to this office. And I would go to that office, and it was no, we don't serve international students. You need to go to this office. And then, so it was a lot of my own lived experiences of experiencing higher education in the US made me very, very student success oriented. I was part of a group where we started the first, graduate alliance for diversity for graduate students at our institution, because we saw that a lot of us were 1 or 2 students of color in our program. And so we did a lot of programming around that. So just my heart lies in student affairs. And then, of course, I worked at UT Austin as the director. I started off as a program evaluation person in enrollment management. So I did a lot of success program evaluation. Then I moved over to the academic kind of side of the house where I did institutional assessment. So that's my career background. And then, of course, I worked in online institutions and worked in EdTech, and then now I'm consulting full-time. I have to say this every time, my influences are Black, feminist, indigenous scholars, who just have shaped my way of thinking, because a lot of times when my lived experience of racism didn't make sense, it was the literature that told me, oh, like this is what it is, or this is microaggression. Oh, that's what's happening to me, because a lot of times we internalize it. So anything and everything that I think about, that I say, and that's why when you see my citations, even in the book chapters that I've written, it'll say Samuga Gyanam Bheda, which is basically community knowledge. And I feel like a lot of my wisdom that I get is through interaction with people, through conversations with colleagues, through, learning from my own clients that I serve through my consulting. So Black feminist scholars, indigenous scholars, Patricia Hill Collins, Chandra Mohante, Vandana Shiva, like all of those folks are folks that I learned from. So just wanted to say there, state that there. And then I come from a familial culture. So it's not, it's different where if your aunt is having, a medical issue, you take care of that. So it's not the individual expectation saying you can take time off or you can do whatever, only if it's your immediate family or your child or your spouse or your husband. It could be your grandparents, it could be, and I know many of you understand that in terms of how higher ed is set up only to validate certain relationships, which are, more the single family unit kind of approach. So that's a little bit about me. Again, if you feel comfortable, feel free to share. I love, like, the folks who've already shared. Please feel free to share in the chat who you are. I may not have time right now, but I also will be looking at the chat in the future, and I would love to, know a little bit more about you. My goal, like I said, for this session is to make sure that I'm bringing you along with me for us to engage in some good trouble, some good activism, and maybe change the way we do business or think about how we do business. So I want to create an empowering space and community for activism among us. And that's the goal. Okay, so I hope you come along with me in this journey. Okay. So having said that, what is your primary role? And I know we wear multiple hats, but what do you see as your primary role? I think someone's mic is on. So if you wanted to switch off your mic just to be safe. Okay. So heavily assessment professionals, a lot of student affairs professionals, wonderful leaders as well. And then we have a sprinkling of students and faculty in your primary role, and that's wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to move. So this is really helpful for me to know, because then I'll frame it in ways that make sense. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, as I move to the next slide, you won't be able to answer this, so I'll just let's keep it posted. Okay. So in higher education, right, the biggest challenge that we often deal with is the disconnect between intention, action, and impact. A lot of us, and you may feel this too, you may have come with the expectation that this session is going to be about something. And then I'm hoping, my intention is for you to leave with strategies and ideas and maybe inspiration to do business differently, right? But then that may not be the impact. My actions, I'm trying to make sure they align with my intention, but maybe they are not, right? And that can be, the impact of that may be where you leave the session, you're like, well, I wasn't sure that I got the message that she was trying to give, or whatever it may be. So same thing happens in higher ed. We all know this. Our intention is something, and many times in terms of alignment, our actions don't align with our intentions. We see this in terms of the policies. We see this in terms of resources. We see this in terms of, roles and responsibilities. We see this in terms of advancement. So that disconnect between intention, action, and impact is what I want us to be able to better address. And this is like the foundation of anything that we do, that our intention and impact, they align. Because I think in higher education, all of us as educators, we come with the best of intentions, with the best of, expectations, and then the impact may not align with that. So if that is the premise, that our intentions oftentimes don't align with our impact, I want to ask you, what do you think is the role or purpose of assessment? And you can type in your answer. Once you type in your answer, you can vote, upvote or downvote someone else's response, and you will see both responses over here. So what is the role or purpose of assessment in your world? Yep. A lot of continuous improvement. That's wonderful to see. Yep. To help understand what is happening. Yep. I like the response that someone wants. Make sure that we go to gauge learning, to improve student learning, to understand what's happening, to give feedback to those who have help, who need help, to give us data. And you can see this even on your screen. To collect evidence, or to get evidence for the reality of student learning in order to compare against our expectations and then take action in hopes of improvement. Wonderful. So you can see from all the responses shared over here, and if y'all want to take a quick minute to vote to see if something really speaks to you and something that's not maybe shared here. Yep, the evaluation of something to improve it, to help understand the current student experience, to improve learning and experiences equitably and sustainably, make informed decisions, fidelity of practice. These are all wonderful. Alignment. Yeah, to understand impact, to understand needs, evidence-based decisions. Right? So I don't know that any of you have not mentioned something that we do. What I would offer, in addition to all the things that you all have stated, I would offer, one second, I'm just pulling my browser to the right screen before I move, and I'm going to move. So if anyone wants to take a quick second to vote or finish up your thought and type it in, and then I'm moving. Okay. So for me, the assessment, when I think about assessment, this is the paradigm shift. I see that assessment is about us telling a story, right? It is about moving. Assessment needs to be about building institutional responsiveness. So that entails continuous improvement. That entails understanding student needs. That entails figuring out what's working, what's not, evaluating it, collecting the right data, all of that, right? But the foundational aspect of it, and I'm so glad at least I didn't see the response of, we are here for accreditation, to support accreditation. That was wonderful not to see that. Maybe someone put it. But I think from a paradigm shift, so this is the first shift that I'm asking all of us to make, that we are concertedly here to build institutional responsiveness rather than be the body that is responsible for compliance, or be the resource that is responsible for compliance. And that is the story that we need to tell to all our colleagues to influence assessment culture on our campus, right? And what does this mean? So our responsibility to our accountability stakeholders. So there is a scholar called Alnoor Ibrahim in the nonprofit world, and many of you may have heard this if you've attended a few of my previous other sessions, other presentations that I've made. But he talks about 3 stakeholders in an organization, right? So there are upwards accountability stakeholders, there are horizontal accountability stakeholders, and there are downwards accountability stakeholders. And I won't get into the problematic representation of who is considered upwards versus who is considered downwards. So we will accept that that is a problem. But the way he frames it is that upwards accountability stakeholders are folks like accreditors and boards and, the folks with the money, funders, things like that. All these are leaders who have the power and authority to be able to influence significant decision-making. They are called the upwards accountability holders. Horizontal accountability holders are our colleagues who do the work, who are in the institution. We are responsible to each other to make things work really well. And then downwards accountability holders are the students, the communities that we serve, right? And so when you think about this, the argument that I would make is if we do our work really well with our downwards accountability stakeholders, if we hold ourselves strongly accountable to those stakeholders that we serve and to our horizontal accountability stakeholders, which is our colleagues, then the upwards accountability stakeholders ideally should take care of themselves, right? So if we are telling the right story to each other, to our students, then that story that needs to be told to our accreditors or to leaders will automatically write itself because we are doing the jobs needed to be done for those we serve. We are doing the job that needs to be done for our colleagues, for the students we serve. So the shift over here is, what story do assessment professionals need to help tell and to whom, right? And I find a lot of times, intentionally or unintentionally, in the consulting work that I do with student affairs, many institutions are oftentimes, and many assessment professionals are unconsciously trying to tell a story to accreditors, right? As opposed to trying to tell the story that's needed to build institutional responsiveness. I want to say that again. We are often trying to tell a story that will cater to the needs of accreditors and upwards accountability stakeholders, rather than telling the story to build institutional responsiveness, okay? And I will let you sit with that. Any questions? If Joe, like, tell me if anything comes up in the chat or anyone wants to unmute and ask, because I know it's a structured conversation, so it can be two ways.
All good so far, Divya.
Okay. Okay. If it comes up, feel free to type it in the chat. Okay. So paradigm shift. We need to stop telling the story to accreditors. We need to be telling the story that needs to be told in terms of what needs to be done to build our institutional responsiveness. What are the needs in our institution? What are the needs in our student affairs offices? What are the needs of our students? And who does that story need to be told to, right? In terms of things changing within our institution. Okay. So with that, in the work that we do, what are some challenges we face on an ongoing basis? And this is a word cloud. So if you're writing a phrase, make sure you hyphenate it without any spaces, because otherwise it'll just populate a single individual words. The politics, absolutely. Lack of capacity, apathy, the budget, lack of representation, elitism, fatigue, capturing, including student voices, turnover. Lack of knowledge, close-mindedness, lack of transparency, right? I'm not seeing it here. Oh yeah, fatigue, there it is. The survey fatigue, I see survey fatigue. There's also I don't know whether anyone else feels it, but again, this keeps coming up when in my consultation experience, it comes up that, yes, there I see it. Okay, I see, overworked, right? This idea that we're often overworked, underpaid, asked to do more with less, right? And that feeling of like frustration, the feeling of we put in a lot of emotions into our work because we are dealing with human beings. And then at the end of that the feeling that, okay, we're tackling this issue, we're dealing with this student, but oh, I wish like the system could change. And I wish like leadership could see what needs to happen because I can clearly see it, right? And so yes, myopia, I love this. This is awesome. If there's anyone who wants to finish your thought before I'll give everyone a minute to kind of look at what has been shared. Yeah. turnover, silos, absolutely. So these are the challenges that we're facing, right? And it's not unique. It's pretty Eurocentric assessment. I love it. So it's pretty standard across various institutions that student affairs, a lot of times, and all of us, that we face this challenge of being underfunded, under-resourced. People are not open to change. Decision-making is not taking into, the data into consideration, or there's apathy, or this, all of this stuff. Okay. So then the question that comes up for me, or so then here's my second paradigm shift that I ask you to consider. Okay. That all these challenges that we face are the oppressive forces that are successfully at play. Okay. And what I mean by that is, when we are telling the story to our accreditor, when we are tracking the data with our students, with student services, what is happening is that we are doing the work of helping support that student and lifting that student up and helping save that student, because student affairs is all about, in the services that we have, oftentimes it's about how do we serve this group, how do we serve this group, how do we make sure that all these folks have the skills and tools and everything that they need to be able to be successful in our institution, that they feel like they belong, right? And so when we are facing apathy, when we are facing helplessness, when we are facing like disinterest, all of that is actually the system, the interwoven, connected, oppressive forces of capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, right? Like all ableism, like all those forces, sexism, everything at play. And it's working really well to keep us in our place, struggling. So like Sisyphus, we are constantly trying to save that one student who comes into our office if we are serving that one student, or a group of students who are coming to our office to save that group of students, to help them, to support them, to nurture them. When the system is set up structurally, policy-wise, like institutionally, these oppressive forces are at play very successfully, that we are never turning, we never have the time to turn our lens over to the system. We are focused on the student. We do a really good job with our students, that we are never looking at the institution and the system, or I wouldn't say we're never looking, that we successfully don't have time, or we believe that we don't have time to address the system and the systemic racism, the systemic isms that are at play, that keep the issues coming up over and over and over and over again, right? And so I don't know whether any of you heard this story or read this story or know of this research, but this idea that, they were observing a group of chimpanzees, and they kept obviously the banana on top. And obviously the first thing that the chimpanzees did when they came into this room was to climb up onto the ladder, because, and then they go up to get the banana. But every time they did that, they were sprayed with forceful cold water. So after a point, they stopped trying to climb, because every time they did that, they were sprayed with cold water, right? So it's like shock. You shock the chimpanzees into submission, right? And then what they did was they introduced a new chimpanzee, a new person coming into the institution, right? Coming into the institution, say, oh, okay, I can see there's possibility for change. I'm going to climb up and get that. I don't know why nobody else is. I'm going to climb up and get that, banana. And even without a spray, all the other chimpanzees beat up that monkey for trying to climb up, because it's like, I know the impact that it's going to have on us. There's no point in you trying to climb up and get that banana, right? So over time, even the new chimpanzee doesn't realize why it's not going up the ladder and getting the banana. And all the chimpanzees are just down. And so nobody is trying to go climb up that ladder. And that becomes status quo. So part of what is happening in how higher ed is operating and in how these oppressive forces are operating is that they are very successfully creating apathy, very successfully creating learned helplessness, learned powerlessness. That is a function of oppression, live and well and thriving, right? It creates feelings of marginalization. It creates feeling pushed out or being pushed out. We call it dropout, or quitting, right? Like when folks quit, because it's like, I'm tired of the politics. I'm tired of this stuff, right? There is transferred and internalized oppression, where we do unconsciously do what was done to us. So the whole hazing process, like, this is how things are. You don't know how bad it was before, but this will help you grow stronger and go through this process, and you'll be good, right? And so there's all of that happening. Competition that kills collaboration. We're only recognized for individual accomplishments. Our performance evaluation, all of that is based on how you individually perform, not did you build a community? Were you able to collaborate with other people? All of that, right? It's like, okay, did you meet your targets? And then now did you succeed? So a lot of times it's about competition. Who gets the accolades? Who gets the credit? There is the myth of meritocracy, right? And the big one, shame. If we were to tell the story saying, hey, I have 300 advisees and I can't get to them and I'm not doing a good job. If we were to tell that story with that lens, right? Or I have 500 students and I'm a one-person office and it's all about support. And I'm 3 weeks out in my appointments with my students because I don't have the capacity to meet with students when they need the help. So they're 3 weeks out in needing the help, and then they come to me for an appointment because that's when I can squeeze them in, right? So there's shame associated as well, in terms of shame associated with the fact that if I say that I'm not able to do this well, everyone else is doing it, or everyone else seems to be quiet about it. So then maybe I am the problem because I'm not doing my job well, right? All of these feelings. So the paradigm shift, everything, all these feelings, all these experiences that we are having is oppression being successful in our institutions, thriving really, really well, right? Institutional oppression, systemic oppression, functioning wonderfully, resulting in our apathy, our learned helplessness, our feeling marginalized, our not wanting to try and reach for that change because, oh, it's going to be too hard, or, oh, like, I don't want to be the one creating problems. I'm going to get slapped on my wrist, right? So by us being okay or not pushing against this actively, not fighting that fight, we are catering and part of the oppressive system at play. So is that what we want to do? That's the question, right? And so that's just something to think about. So this is the second thing. The first one was, we need to be telling the story to build institutional responsiveness. The second is, if we are not intentionally overcoming our apathy, our learned helplessness, our feelings of marginalization or fear of failure or fear of being reprimanded, that is then catering to the oppressive forces at play that is keeping us quiet. Okay, and that's what we are doing. Okay, so now my question to you is, as all of us are focused on equity, doing good work in our institution, how do you embed equity in your work or context? And this is a free response. You can just, you can just type in your response. Feel free to put it in the chat as well if that feels comfortable. So what do you do? Some folks, I mean, the usual answer that I know most people try is like, we try to look at our data, we try to disaggregate our data and look at the impact on different populations of the same service. I'll let you respond. And if you don't feel like me either, maybe you're typing. Or if nobody feels comfortable. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Divya, the poll is for the old question. I keep trying to refresh.
Oh, okay. Let me check.
Oh, there it came through for somebody.
Okay. Maybe it's 1 second. Oh, it must be a Wi-Fi thing. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. Let me go back 1 second. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Jill. I think there may be a Wi-Fi. Yep, it's not, there's some tech issue. So If you want to just put it in the chat, thank you, because even for me on my phone, I'm getting the old response. Thank you, Joe, for bringing that to my attention. I'm so sorry. Why is that? Okay, so a couple of people, disaggregating data, having more transparency, low stakes entry to assessment work, wonderful. Listen to our students, look at our policies and practices that create barriers to success. So obviously pay attention to student voice. Re-examine policies for impact on student experiences. That's wonderful, Denise. Include other voices, perspectives. Yeah, thank you, Megan, Kelsey. I'm so sorry about the tech issue. Yeah, equity, pedagogy, yes, equitable. So a lot more student voice, guiding folks, highlighting data, trying methodological diversity, include students in the assessment process, right? So there is some good work happening in terms of embedding equity in assessment and for, embedding equity in assessment and then achieving equity through assessment, right? So there's some good work going on. Include students, have more transparency, disaggregate the data, have it be low stakes, make sure that you're collecting the right data, make sure that there's learning happening around best practices around equity. So there's all of that good stuff, right? Now, when we talk about equity, and so this is the third paradigm shift, and I'll get to it. Most of us have already seen this, and as I'm sure many of you may I at least have a problem with this picture, and I'm sure many of you do as well. The problem with this picture, there's equality, equity, and then reality. Okay, so this is the first version. I'm sure many of you have seen this before in other presentations. Okay, and then you also have equality, equity, and liberation, right? And I like this picture marginally better, again, because when we think, a lot of times it's just these two pictures. It's just equality and equity. And for me, this is the second, I'm scrolling. So the second picture, which is equity, is still problematic for me. And it doesn't really speak to equity for me, or at least maybe it speaks to equity, but it doesn't speak to justice and liberation for me, which is why this third picture is more meaningful. And that's because on some level, right, the assumption, there is like an unconscious deficit thinking approach ascribed to this whole picture. And the way I like to think about it is that we unintentionally then say this person is shorter, this person is normal height, or this person is small, right? So there are traits and tendencies ascribed to people needing equity or needing the supports to help advance equity for them, for that group, right? We engage in unconscious, and leadership and decision makers oftentimes engage in unconscious bias and deficit thinking around those groups of students, right? Whereas equity would be about everyone having similar. It's almost like if you were to actually have a picture, and I've searched for this, I found it once and I haven't again. But imagine if the race were there and everyone had similar abilities, similar physicality, similar stamina, similar everything, right? And you had thorns and meshes and along one person's way. Those are the oppressive forces at play, right? That everyone who is kind of similar in terms of their ability and the opportunities that they have to succeed, the system has put enough barriers in their way for them not to be successful, right? In this picture, what comes across is, oh, that person is shorter, so they need help. So unconsciously, there is a deficit mindset at work saying, oh, or that person is smaller, right? Like there are all these subconscious narratives that come into play in terms of saying, oh, this is a smaller person or a child, and this is, the person. So this person is an adult, he doesn't need, he's fine. This person is a child, so let's help them, right? So that the idea that help is often associated or offered to people who need it, and that makes them the people who need it, like the blame game there, the unconscious blame game, that's a problem. So I try never, so if you use only these two pictures in any of your presentations, I would ask you to reconsider them. And then liberation is where, so this is the third paradigm. We need to be moving from equity to liberation, the third paradigm shift. And what I mean by that is these structural, why is that wall right there, right? And I would go even so far as to ask the question of like, why should they be standing here alone? Like, why are they not able to be inside the auditorium, right? Like, or inside the stadium, right? And so you can share your own idea over here, over here. But when we start looking at things from a liberation perspective, we are no longer focused, our unit of focus or our unit of measure, whatever, it changes because you're starting to look at the systems at play. So to that person who in the chat had put, revisiting policies and understanding its impact on students and understanding, what needs to be changed, that is looking at the system. When we are looking at things through a liberation lens as opposed to or a justice lens as opposed to an equity lens, we are no longer focused on supporting the folks who need the support, to give them the opportunity and to kind of equalize opportunity for everyone. Yes, that is very, very important. That is the work that we do day in and day out as student affairs professionals. And as folks, as assessment professionals who help student affairs professionals tell their story, part of that story is that, like to say, these many students were served, these many students were successful, our graduation rates increased, students felt a better sense of belonging, all of those metrics, right? However, if we were to focus on how are we part of liberation, how are we no longer part, like we are, yes, we're part of equity building, but how are we a part of liberation? Then imagine what kind of data you would be tracking. An example I will give you is if, let's say, you are like student conduct, or you are ombuds office, or you are, disability services. Imagine if you were to track how many students came in with what policy issues that were underlying, the reasons why they came in. And you found that 50% of the reason why students came was because of this one policy. 50% of students who came into your office was because of this, had like their case had something to do with this policy. Imagine if you track that data and share that back with the academic side of the house, where you said, hey, like this policy needs to be rethought, needs to be rewritten, right? So that's a way in which you're looking at, rather than saying, okay, we had 50 cases, we were able to solve, and students were back on their path towards graduation, or they were, the consequences were dealt with. If you were to start looking at, okay, so why are these students coming? So your data, you're shifting your lens in terms of the storytelling to say, how do we look at the services that we're providing and track the information needed for the institution to be more responsive, right? And so that's where that paradigm shift comes in. And this is where, when we're thinking about liberation, we are thinking about what do we need to change so that this different story is told to different stakeholders, which is our colleagues and our students saying, hey, we saw that 50% of our cases were coming in were for this policy issue. And thanks to realizing that, we have now working with the faculty senate to change this policy, to make it clearer, to make it better. Similarly, let's say, again, racism in the institution, right? Unconscious bias. Let's say, students are being sent from a particular department, or again, so you can look at it at the faculty level, you can look at it at the department level, at the program level, at the college level. You can say, we see like 80% of our cases are coming from a particular department, 80% of our cases, and they are all like the student conduct cases. We can see uneven distribution. So you're disaggregating the data, and you can see that there's overrepresentation of a certain group. And so then there is your evidence again about how unconsciously the system is racialized. Faculty or that department needs some additional support and training around how unconscious bias may be playing out, or straight up racism may be playing out, which is then impacting the students. So rather than or let's say, in 10% of your cases, again, I'm using the same example, but I'm hoping that it's easier than to tell the story for all of you and help make it make sense. So let's say there are, 10% of the cases that are coming in, you're seeing that the reason why those student conduct cases came in is because faculty escalated the problem. They didn't mean to, but faculty, in either how they communicated or what they said or how they said it, they escalated a problem. So if you were to look at it from an institutional responsiveness perspective, rather than, okay, those are the cases, now I have to work with this office and coordinate with this office, you would take that information back to the Center for Teaching and Learning, or to faculty development offices, or to the associate deans, and say, your faculty needs some training around how to de-escalate situations when they find themselves in this situation with students. Because we can see that the cases where we are spending the most time, or 50% of our, or 20%, whatever cases, they are getting escalated and then now needs high touch, high, energy intervention, which is then taking away from, we are underserved, under-resourced. It's taking away from all our other students, is because this is happening consistently for faculty. So can we please do a training with your faculty around how, give them some cue cards, give them some common scripts, give them some tools and strategies on how they should be addressing academic integrity violation, or how they should be addressing X, right? And so a lot of times, the example that I don't like to use it. Okay, so the example that comes to mind is, I've been watching a lot of reruns of Grey's Anatomy, so I'm going to use that analogy, and I'm sorry for the violent image that it may evoke. I apologize in advance. But this idea that, like your burn victims are coming in, okay? And you're treating burn victim after burn victim after burn victim, right? And that's where you don't have time, you're not able to breathe, you're not able to think, because you're serving the burn victim, right? No one's addressing the fire outside. Somebody needs to address the fire outside. And we, as student affairs professionals and student affairs assessment professionals, have the best access to the data to be able to show the fire is there outside that needs to be addressed. Please address it, right? And so what I'm asking, or what I'm encouraging all of us to do with this idea of this paradigm shift, is we need to stop just treating the burn victims. And it feels like, oh, Divya, you're asking us to do more with less, right? So I understand. And so I go back to the 3 paradigm shifts, right? The idea that we are not able to make change, or the idea that we can't make change. We don't have time to make change. And how do we then offer the data to the institution, to our colleagues, to be able to say things need to change. Here's the impact of what you're not changing on our students, okay? So those are the 3 paradigm shifts that I wanted to share with you. And then I'm going to reinforce it with some more information, but feel free to, if you have questions, now is the time to put it in the chat so that I have time to answer them. Okay. So we all use this, have heard our colleagues use this. Again, Maslow's first, then Bloom's, like students have to feel safe, feel like they are respected, feel a sense of belonging. And then only we can pay attention to them actually learning all the material in the classroom, right? And for many of us, and I'm sure a lot of us, again, because I'm assuming in student affairs, a lot of folks are constantly engaging with social justice, at least based on my experience, we see that even Bloom's taxonomy was derived or taken off of, the Blackfoot people, right? The First Nation perspective. And it was a completely different interpretation, the whitewashing of their way of life. He couldn't quite understand it. He had to use interpreters when he was with the community. And their approach, the First Nations approach, is actually where they say every child, every human that comes into this world is whole. So imagine that thinking, that we stop seeing our students, and by we, I'm saying us, like student affairs, assessment professionals, faculty, everyone, like readers, leaders. We start seeing students as whole human beings who are just fine the way they are, right? Who have lives, who deal with challenges, who have strengths, who have weaknesses, whole human beings who are self-actualized, who need to be preserved, who need to be taken care of, and who need help understanding their place in the community, understanding how they can contribute to the community, right? To help perpetuate the values and the best practices of the community. So that is the First Nations perspective. So if we were to use kind of this model to think about the work that we do, where we are saying unconsciously or not, like we are teaching people to say these many students, hey, like when a leader comes in and we say, hey, 5% of our students are Black and none of them feel like they belong, right, in this institution because there's so much of racism happening in the institution, right? Or international schools or whoever, name it, right? And the way we would have that conversation is saying, what does the institution need to do to change? We want to build a sense of belonging for the community, but who do we need to push in terms of our activism and our allyship in terms of addressing the system rather than only serving the students, which of course they need the tools, they need the strategies, they need to understand that this is not them, it is the system that is working against them, their lived experiences, of course they need support, right? But it's, I would say, like in my PhD program, when I learned it, it's like the psychology approach versus the sociology approach, right? Like if we keep treating the problem rather than the system that's creating the problem, then the problem is never going to go away. And so what is our role? And that's where I think student affairs, we have a unique opportunity, unique power, I would call it, like our superpower is to be able to get that information that can influence the system to say, this is not working for our students. And you are the problem, right? And I mean that in a very gentle, loving way. It's not like, oh, you're the problem, gotcha. No, but yeah. And so anyway, so I would say that. And then, so we need to move. So the paradigm over here, the paradigm shift is we need to move from equity to liberation, which means that we change the focus of the story, right? The focus of the story is not, imagine if you went in to a faculty meeting where you're talking about your office as student affairs, and then you don't say like, we are the office, like we are the writing center. Okay, let's say use the writing center. We are the writing center. We support students who need, to improve their English skills. Instead of saying that, imagine if you told the story. At least 5 faculty in every school send students who struggle with writing papers to us with the assumption that their papers will improve and their grades will improve. That is a wrong assumption. As a writing center, we are not editors for your students' papers. As a writing center, we take time to help the student understand what they're working with, whether it's grammar or whether it's sentence structure or storytelling or logic of a paper. That's what we do. And so if you send us your student in your course in the middle of the semester or towards the end, when the student is almost failing your course, you're doing a disservice to your student because the student then has nowhere to go. They come thinking that they're going to get help and they don't get the help that they need to succeed in your class, and then they're failing. So what are you doing about it? So imagine if you went with that story as opposed to, we are the writing center and we support XYZ, right? And I'm not saying one is better, or I am saying one is better, but the ability to influence decision-making and to influence change at the institutional level is if we change the focus of our story and we tell a different story. And so with that, change the data that you seek and that is tracked and that is shared, right? What data do you want to be tracking? Do you want to be tracking, we had like 100 people who participated in our event and it was a success? Is that what we want to track? Or do we want to track saying, as a result of attending our program, we actually found that the rest of the university has no knowledge about this. And we need to do more to do this. Or we need to go and actually take our efforts into departments and into colleges and whatever to make a change, right? And so we need to move away from unconscious deficit approaches to universal design approaches, right? Saying this is not about serving that group of students. This is about changing the institution so that every single student feels like they belong, feels that they can be successful, and is supported by everyone else who learns, like, how can I support a student with disability, right? How can I be a partner on a project with a student who is struggling with the English language, right? So how do we teach the rest of the change our focus from this group to the system? And I'm sorry, like I'm a visual, whatever, person. But how do we change our focus from focusing on our students to focusing on what needs to change within the system? And so, so this is, I think, my last question to all of you. So currently, what do student affairs folks in your context do really well? And I want to go through this before you all rate it. It's basically a rating scale. You can move things in what you think are, this is what we do best to this is not what we do great. So let's start with best. and then you'll move things up and down. So one is adhere to standards, policies, laws, etc. Offer a strong curricular approach, right? And student affairs as a whole body is moving towards a curricular approach, right? To demonstrate saying, hey, we are teaching, students are learning things when they are with us. Like we have an academic or we have a learning value in the institution. And again, that is us catering to the institutional narratives that are being imposed on us by oppressive forces. So yes, we need to have a curricular approach, but what is the story that we need to be telling around conflict resolution skills, around leadership skills, around study habits and integrity violations, right? Around time management. What is that story? It needs to be different. So we have, so as you keep changing it, it'll keep changing. But I think all of them are self-explanatory. Like, are we engaging in robust and meaningful assessment? My experience in consulting with a lot of different universities and student affairs has been that a lot of times there's a program evaluation approach, which is really strong. It's actually very, very, it's best practice. However, when we use like a program evaluation logic model, a lot of times, again, impact is not being tracked. So we need to do as student affairs and as assessment professionals in student affairs. I'm happy to discuss more about this offline, but we are often tracking what we did rather than what we did it have the impact we wanted it to have, right? We oftentimes are not operationalizing our outcomes, in which case then our assessments, especially with the curricular approach, won't be adequate. And what I mean by operationalizing it is, if we say students need to have conflict resolution skills, like we want to build conflict resolution skills in RAs, right? What does that look like in terms of what does that look like in actual practice? And how would you, so when you assess it, then you would have to have a curricular approach in assessing it, which would mean, are you going to give them scenario-based assessments? Are you going to give them role-playing situations? Or are you going to do observing? Or are you going to track the number of cases that have, reports of conflict that come in and that they have gone down? Are you going to do a student self-reflection, an RA self-reflection saying, hey, I was able to deploy this strategy that I learned in conflict resolution workshop versus this strategy, right? So there are lots of things in thinking about it. And so I think most people have ranked it. We have served students. We do that really well. We adhere to standards, policies, and laws. We do that really well. We understand student lived experiences really well. We offer a strong curricular approach. We engage in robust, meaningful assessment. Then comes operationalize outcomes, tell a good story of need and impact at scale, which is something, as we have seen, we need to do better, and influence decision-making, which we feel that we don't, right? And so with that, so when I want to offer you the academic side of the house, the perspective, right? Academic side of the house, again, faculty in terms of orientation, right? What kind of orientation do faculty have? And if they don't have an orientation, how do you partner with again, Centers for Teaching and Learning and say, hey, faculty need to know about this and this and this, right? And maybe it's an online webinar that they can take at their own time, or you go in person and again, tell that story the right way. But faculty adhere to standards. They have their policies in their syllabus and they want everyone to adhere to that. They have their discipline, knowledge, expertise because they are trained in that usually. However, they may not know how to translate that into effective curriculum design, right? Most faculty haven't been trained on how to design their curriculum really well. That's not part of their doctoral training or their teaching training most of the time. So a lot of times the backward design approach of operationalizing outcomes and then building assessments that are relevant, that are meaningful, that help students understand, like, how am I achieving the outcome that this particular course says I'm supposed to gain? Like, how am I achieving that through these assignments and assessments? All of that many times is a gap in faculty. That's work that I do as well. So I can speak to that. And then, they do, in terms of assessment expertise, again, like implicit bias and the, equitable instrument creation, equitable assessment design. Like, there are gaps over there, significant gaps. Engaging in andragogy and pedagogy and robust andragogy and pedagogy. So again, there are gaps there. And then understanding the student lived experience, there are gaps there because the standards and policies oftentimes don't align with the student lived experience. So for a faculty member to be successful as a faculty member, they need all of this knowledge and skill set, right? And we have, in student affairs, we have some of this knowledge and skill set that we can offer to them so that we become partners, right? And a lot of times we keep saying, oh, faculty affairs, like they are not listening to us and they have all the money, they have their power, like we have money to do this. And I mean, we don't have any money for this and they have all the money in the world. So how do we be activist allies and move out of that framing of things to say, hey, you need to be paying attention. We need to partner on this. Like it's not one or the other. How can we put the load and push so that the other party can rise up and be better at what they do and vice versa, right? How can faculty know when I've shared this with a few faculty, with Centers for Teaching and Learning colleagues that I have, they're like, we didn't know that in the residence halls, like folks are talking about this. We didn't know that they have this information. We didn't know that students are talking about, oh, this faculty don't take their class. And, they're all, there's racism experience or whatever it is, right? So how can we surface the information that needs to be surfaced to be able to take that back for change, for meaningful change from an organizational institution perspective? And so I'm 2 minutes out and I haven't finished a lot of my stuff, which is, I'm very usual, like this is how I am, but I will leave you with this. So for us to open the door for possibilities and action, and basically this whole thought process arose from, if any of you read the book, Reframing Equity, Reframing Assessment to Center Equity. So in the last chapter, I lay out an equity framework, which I think I need to be calling the justice framework. But I talk about, every space is an opportunity to embed equity and to embed justice. We are all folks, actors who can do that. And our actions need to be guided by certain anchors where we need to be guided by social justice. We need to build intentional community. We need to make time, reprioritize how we spend our time. Like I said, we can be Sisyphus or we can be treating the burn victims and say we never have time to address things at scale, but we need to make that time to address things at scale because otherwise we are catering to the oppressive forces that are keeping us in the way we are, the way things are. So with that, with these 3 paradigm shifts, and then communicate better, right? Like tell a different story, be restorative in our communication efforts, all of that. So have a look at that framework and then maybe someday, we'll get to talk about that framework. That was what we skipped, I just skipped. But so the opening the door for possibilities is that we need to be building about institution. We need to be about building institutional responsiveness. The system is often invisible to us, but constantly impacts us and shackles us. We perpetuate the system through powerlessness, narratives, and inaction. We need to move from equity to liberation, and we have the framework to do so. So use the equity framework anchors. And if there's anything else that came out for you, in this talk, I'm happy to learn about it. Email me. I have, if you would like to cite this, again, this is the first time I'm talking about it. SAAL, I submitted a blog about this to SAAL, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that blog should come out. So I hope you will look for it. And again, as you talk about this, if you could make sure that you cite this, I would really appreciate it. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I thank you for your time and I thank you for your attention. Thank you for your engagement. Again, we are at 1. So I will let you go.
Thanks so much, Divya. This was awesome. As you can see, there's plenty of kudos coming in through the chat.
Thank you all. And good luck with the work that you're doing. We're all activists, and so we just need to keep that lens and collaborate with each other. So
thank you. All right, I am going to stop the recording now.